Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. Now in this episode we're going to be looking at this Rivarossi Bavarian State Railways, I think it is, 1366462 steam loco. And it is one of the most beautiful looking engines I've ever worked on. It is absolutely lovely, this thing. And this has been sent in by Nick, and as you can see here I'm just cleaning off the detritus out of the box. And Nick has said this is a non-runner, it's band driven, and you can see there that the wheels are turning around freely. There's no resistance in there at all, so I'm going to start by looking at trying to remove the body shell off this. Now this was, I had to do a lot of research on this model, so I disassembled it correctly. I didn't want to break it. But there's a screw in the chimney, and then the rest of the body shell unclips, it lifts off from the front, and there are two clips in the cab. Now, as you'll see later, reassembling this model was a nightmare, but it does come apart relatively easy. And once we're inside, there's a hefty weight inside the boiler barrel, and you can see there's the motor, and there is the band drive, and the bands turn on that and turn the wheels. Not a fan of band driven locos. But we're going to have a look at getting this repaired. But the one thing I did find was on the transmission box here, I think this used to be grease, and it has gone almost solid. It feels like solid plastic, but it used to be grease. So this is going to need a complete strip down. Now to get into the transmission box, a gearbox, this was hard work in itself. You have to undo the two screws on the side, then you have to unclip all the wires and all the associated clips to remove the running plate, including two further screws underneath the foot plate. So I'm just removing those screws now. And it's another one of those models where the tender is permanently connected, so it is a bit of a tricky one to work on when they're like that. But eventually I managed to unclip everything, as you can see here, but with the wires and everything there, it's all still together. And when I open this gearbox up, this grease has solidified. It is the worst grease I've ever come across, and it is solid. It has gone rock solid. No wonder when Nick tried to run this that the drive belt snapped. It's just, I mean, I can't even turn this by hand. I mean, look at that. It is not even, it's sticky, but it's not pliable. It is rock solid. So all of this has got to come out. So using various toothpicks and the flat-bladed screwdriver, I scrape all what's left of this hard grease away. I also take the drive shaft out and give everything a thorough clean up. But when I'm in here, I notice that this gearbox has got this pivoting transmission gear. Now it's very interesting. I've never seen one of these before. Now what it is when the loco's under power, that pivots and engages the drive wheels, but when it's not under power, it pivots on its own out the way, allowing the loco to freewheel. So I don't quite know, I don't quite see the point in why it's there, but it's a very good thing to have, especially under DCC, because you wouldn't have to consist these locos together if you were ever to chip them. You could drag one around as that transmission gear automatically moves out of the way. But anyway, back to the model, and you can see the drive shaft here I've removed. This grease, or should I say plastic now, is jamming up all the bearings, and it's all going to need clean. And it did take a couple of hours to clean all this, so I was satisfied that it was all gone, because you'd clean a lot of parts, then you'd find more of it, and especially when it had gone down into the drivetrain on that front drive wheel there, which I couldn't take apart. I had to literally turn the wheel a couple of turns, like a quarter turn, clean it out, turn it, and it took ages. But as you can see, it's all in here. It's all jammed up, and I'm literally scraping it off with this wooden skewer. It was a nightmare to remove. So this is about an hour and a half later, and you can see now that it's all been removed. And there's that pivoting gear. You can quite clearly see there, a triangular shaped one, this one here. So there we go, look, when I spin the drive shaft, it engages the gear forwards and backwards. It pivots and engages the drive. And you can see there that the wheels are turning. and it pivots backwards and forwards. But then if I put the model on the floor, it will disengage itself, allowing it to freewheel. Now I am going to fill that transmission box with grease, but I'm going to put some oil on the bearings first. Now I will put plenty of grease in that transmission box as it's a sealed unit. I will fill it with grease because who knows when the next time this will be stripped down. And that Hobby Lube white grease will last a good 8 to 10 years in there before it itself needs replacing. So I also put some oil down on the axles. I haven't taken the base plate off. I don't know if there's any proper bearings on this model or not. Looking at the engineering, it would not surprise me if there are proper bearings on that. It's just very, very complex to take apart. So the less I can remove off this model, the better. So now I'll also oil the bearings there near the band drive. And as I said, squeezing some Hobby Lube grease down into that secondary gearbox, which must be on the axle. There's another gear down there. And then I'm going to put some on the proper drivetrain gear. And all on that pivoting gear, and I'm going to turn it by hand just to spread it around in here. Make sure there's plenty in there. The less resistance there is on this model, the better, because like I said, this is band driven, so you really need this to be free and well lubricated. Otherwise, that band will snag and snap. And as you'll see in a moment, these bands for this model are not easy to come by in the UK at all. In fact, this restoration would not have been possible had it not been for a chap called Peter, but I'll detail that in a moment. But as you can see, I'm just spreading this Hobby Lube grease all through the gears, making sure everything's coated. They are brass gears. They will need some lubrication, otherwise they will wear out. And once I'm satisfied it's spread out, I just add a few drops of Fleischmann oil. This will act as a bit of a thinner with the grease, make it more malleable. And it also stops it drying out as quick. So the transmission box cover plate is then refitted. And as you can see, I forgot to mention, I did manage to get the motor and everything out. It's all still connected just off to the top there. The chassis plate and that, it's all still connected with the wires. But I did manage to remove the motor to work on this chassis a bit easier. And also releasing those two screws underneath the cab, as I showed earlier, also allowed the tender to be removed, which was a great help in rebuilding the model. So the transmission box or gearbox cover is now being put back on, and I'm gently tightening the screws up because I don't want to strip the threads out. And as I said, I could not find a drive band for this in the UK. Nobody stocks Rivarossi spares, or at least the spares I needed. So initially I found a Hornby Dublo traction tyre. Now this is a Hornby Dublo tyre for a Kobo diesel, and it fit. It did fit around the band drive on the drive shaft and on the motor. So I fitted that, then made sure all the bulbs and everything were present. The bulb there had I'd removed that when we stripped the model down so I didn't break it. And that is just a simple push fit into the front, and that brass connector there supplies it with power. So I've fit like I said, a Hornby Dublo traction tyre. I break out the rolling road. Fingers crossed this works. And there we go. The model is now running under its own power for the first time in who knows how long. So that traction tyre is working, and there is enough tension there between the motor and the drive shaft to turn it. And it also proves that the drive shaft and the gear train are well lubricated, as everything is turning and running lovely, and it really is a smooth and quite a powerful runner, this model. However, all is not good. It's not as good as it seems. Here's a close-up here of it running. You can see the band drive there turning around, but the traction tyre is fractionally too big. It is probably 0.2 millimeters too wide to fit in the actual band drive. But I've started to reassemble it. I put the tender body shell back on. I removed that just to dust it all off because there was nothing wrong with the body shell on this model at all. It was all mechanical. This is the cab full plate. That clips into place and actually acts not only as a detail part, but it also keeps the wires in place. When I can get it on the correct way around, that is. Make sure the wires are lined up with the cutout underneath. and that pushes down. And then the body shell. Now this, to get this back on is very, very difficult. You have to engage the clip. There are 3 clips under the cab. There's 2 on each side and 1 on the top. And you have to engage them, and you have to try and splay the sides of the cab out without making the handrails fall out, etc. And it was quite difficult. I didn't do it on camera. I moved the camera out of the way because I couldn't do it with the camera stand in the way. But it did eventually clip back on, and I refit all the screws. I just give it a final polish up with a warm soapy cotton bud just to remove any grease marks, fingerprints, dust that I've left on the body shell. And I give it a bench test, and you can see there that it is running with a battery on straight track. It is running really well. And I was all ready to send this back to Nick. I'd even contacted him and said, it's ready to go. I'm going to box it up and send it to you. However, I took it to Trains for You to test on their DC layout, and the loco would not run round corners. There was not enough power inside that drive belt. It would run on straight track, but as soon as it hit a curve, even a 3rd radius curve, it would stop. Wouldn't haul anything. So it was back to square one, and the model was set aside for some time, even after Nick had paid for it, because I couldn't get a correct drive belt for it, which is where Peter came in. Peter is a subscriber who lives in France, and he did contact me several months ago when I did that Lima diesel, and said if I ever needed parts from the continent to email him, and he would try and source them for me. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting that traction tyre belt off because it was no good, and I'm going to try something else. But indeed, I found the part in Germany in a model shop, and Peter in France did indeed buy me. He bought it for me, sent it over, didn't want any payment until it arrived. It took some time, but eventually I had 2 drive belts delivered from Germany via France, and it is only due to the kindness of Peter and his willingness to find these and buy these parts in Europe for me that Nick's model has returned to use. Now, my heartfelt thanks go out to you, Peter, and also convey thanks from Nick, because like I said, if it wasn't for you and what you did, this model would not have been repaired into running order. And it just shows the YouTube community, and it's fantastic. You know, it's so good that people are willing to do that. And I am eternally grateful, and I am very thankful to Pete for doing that for me. So anyway, enough waffling on. What I'm doing now is I'm trying to fit the correct drive band. Now these bands from Rivarossi, they are actually serrated on the inside to fit the, almost like gear teeth, to fit the drive belt, I suppose you'd call it, the drive belt gear, and they fit inside the brass drive band gear. What would you call it? It would fit inside that brass part there, and it fits correctly. Whereas the traction tyre was moving, and when it changed direction, the tyre was slipping up one direction, or if you reversed it, it'd slip up, so it wasn't gaining the traction needed. Now, I didn't want to disassemble this model again because it's very, very complex. So manipulating this band with cocktail sticks and my tweezer nose pliers, ever mindful that if I broke this band, I'd be back to square one. But eventually, I hooked it below on the motor and then got it on the drive shaft itself. And now fitted with the correct spare part from Rivarossi, this 1366 steam loco. I will test it again to make sure and get the battery. It's all sitting on the track correctly. And it was a steady start. But eventually, when it was seated, when the band seated itself, we were away, and the model is now running much, much better than it ever did with that traction tyre. Even with the battery, you can see how much faster it's running. Now, with the traction tyre, I think using a traction tyre, it's too elastic. It just stretches too much. And here I'm demonstrating that gear. I can push it along with my finger, put the battery on, and the drive shaft engages itself, and it will drive. But then if I want to shunt it or push it around, it will disengage. So here's that beautiful loco running around on Trains for Use DC layout now, and you can see what a difference the correct drive belt has made. And it's finally ready, having been with me for a good 4 or 5 months, this loco, due to waiting parts. It's finally ready to go back to Nick, who has received it and is very happy with it. And I can see why. This is a beautiful looking loco. I love the colour of it and I love the look of it. And now I'm on the lookout to try and obtain my own one. So again, many thanks to Pete for getting the bands from Germany and sending them to me in the UK. This Trash to Track would not have been possible without you. So thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye for now. Yeah.